So good evening, everyone. This is our next class on what's up for the future. And what we're doing is we're looking at basic order principles and how to incorporate them into our lives so that we can do whatever we can to make the world a better place to live in. Part of prayer is controlling the conditions in our lives. And when we think about it, we do that anyway because a lot has to do with our frame of mind. How we see the world is, to a large degree, how the world presents itself back to us. So if we look for the good, we tend to experience more of the good. If we look for the bad, vice versa. If we're always critical of everything, then we're going to continually see more and more that's wrong with the world. Whereas if we have gratitude and we're appreciative of the good things in the world, then it just quite naturally uh, makes itself part of a bigger part of our experience. So there's really very little difference between that and prayer. Prayer turns out to be like just mind control. It's choosing what you're going to look at and what you're willing to accept. So there's more to it than that, of course, because we really are co-creators with God, and we have a very definite uh, ability to invoke the powers of nature and redirect how those powers manifest. So there's that aspect of prayer work as well. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is when it comes to working with prayer and with determining what you're going to experience in the world, it's a lot better to start with what actually exists and not try to dream up something that is supernatural or fanciful. So one of the things that actually exists that we know exists is this field of energy that surrounds the human body. And we call that in the order your personal atmosphere. And it doesn't take a lot of imagination to sense it, although you can use imagination to kind of open it up. You open your vision up to where you can sense it. It's literally like just a field of electromagnetic force around the body. And it's not measurable by normal scientific instruments because it's on a different wavelength. It's a different frequency that you get with like electromagnetic electrical equipment. But it's there, and we can feel it. And everyone has instances in their lives where they have been able to sense another person impinging upon that field. Because everyone has one, then those fields can interact with each other, and we begin to discover that there's a lot more that we're picking up on from the other person simply through this field that surrounds us and that surrounds them. So yeah, I know everyone here is familiar with the atmosphere, and I'm sure that you've worked with it, to some degree. So I'm going to invite you to work with it in a very interesting way, which is to control the amount of negative energy that comes at you from other people. So this is a really interesting way to work with energy, because what we're doing in so much of this work is we're working with energy. So what you want to do is you want to sense the atmosphere around you, and it goes out about 3 feet or so in different, with different people, and get a sense that it has an outer shell to it. That's about, anywhere from 6 inches, 6 to 12 inches thick, right? It's kind of where it's a denser zone of electromagnetic force. So if you become aware of that, and we all know what it feels like when somebody is sending negative vibes our way. We come into contact with them and they give us the evil eye, or they're just giving off bad vibes because they don't like us, or they're trying to manipulate us or scare us away, any number of things like that. But we can definitely feel it. We feel impinged upon, like they're trying to make us feel a certain way. But if we're aware of this outer shell of the atmosphere, then we can let what the energy waves that they're sending towards us stop at the border of our atmosphere, almost like a windshield stops the wind, when you're driving down the highway. So as you do this, what you're doing, it doesn't keep you from seeing what the energy is, what their intent is, but you're not letting it in. You're not letting it impact you. So if they're trying to make you feel bad, it's not going to work because it's stopping at the outer boundary of your atmosphere. And if you try this, and it's very easy, and it's very easy to see, then you'll find that you can tell what they're thinking, you can tell what their intent is, but you have no reaction to it because it's not impacting you, it's not hitting you. So this is something it would be really good for you to try, like this whole upcoming week, and use it as like a demonstration of the power of prayer, because what you're doing is you're using your mind to control the energy in your life. And this is one way that energy manifests. So as you do this, and you can do it even right now, you can get a sense of your atmosphere, and you can see it like a sphere all around you, even behind you. But just to make it easy, just see it in front of you, kind of like a 90, 100 degrees, something like that span, and just feel how the rest of the room is registering on the surface of your atmosphere, and let it stop there. You see, because normally, even if you're in a room by yourself, the room itself has a lot of memories and vibrations of its own, from you and from everybody else in the house, and just from the history of the room itself. So all of that is registered and becomes part of the physical material of the room. And you normally don't recognize it, but it's there and it impacts you. But if you deliberately hold that out, then the room will start to look a little different because you're not letting it impact you. It will enable you to see it from a different perspective. Because if you're letting it affect you, then you are enmeshed with that astral field, which is like the memory of the feelings that the room has registered, throughout time. So if you let all of that just stop at the outer layer of your atmosphere, then it does something to your vision, does something to your sight, and you can begin to see it in a different way. And you begin to see yourself in a different way, where you begin to feel more like you're in control. It's like you're in the driver's seat, and you feel well nested into the chair you're sitting in the space that you're occupying. It becomes your space. You are no longer a part of the space that you're in, but you have your own space, and that gives you an objectivity and therefore a position of control that you may not have had before. And if you practice this, then you can begin to see things that you hadn't noticed. Maybe the color of the walls is off, or maybe the way the room was built is not exactly harmonious in terms of shape. And it makes, if you let it, you can see how it makes you feel a little bit off because it just simply doesn't have a nice balance to it. All kinds of things. It's from lighting to color to the patterns that it either affords and makes the room easier to live in, or makes it more difficult. All kinds of things will show up to you. And so that's just kind of a basic example. When it really gets interesting is when you do that with other people, because we are all transmitters of energy. We are continually giving off waves of energy that are loaded with feelings and with ideas and with force. So, and patterns of thought, habit patterns, patterns of speech. Energy is never just blind energy. It always comes with a full package of intelligence and memory and feeling and all kinds of good stuff. So if you stop it at the border of your atmosphere, it gives you greater powers of observation and discernment. But another interesting thing happens too when you stop whatever a person is directing at you. For an example, it's negative energy, and you let it stop at the border. You don't let it in, but you stop it at the border of your atmosphere. An interesting thing happens. It's like your atmosphere then becomes a mirror to that person. So the person gets to see what they're sending to you. And from their perspective, you appear non-affected and calm, and which makes them then have to deal with their own stuff that they are trying to affect you with. And if you're unaffected, then they have to then take it back. And they're then going to have to deal with that negative energy themselves. So do you get a sense of that? Is this making inroads? So this is something you can try. You can work with this, and just don't be limited to negative encounters. You can also use it you can use it with anyone, regardless of the kind of energy that they're trying to engage you in. You can let it stop at your atmosphere and then see what happens. See how the other person responds or reacts. And because they're going to become very aware of the characteristic vibration that they are emitting and expecting you to accept. And you're seeing it, but you're not letting it touch you. So in that case, there's only one thing it can do, and that is to reflect back upon them. So this is part of your prayer life, because you're using your mind to control the energies and use the energies in your life, in your everyday life. So does anybody have an example of this kind of thing that is relatable or that you can tell us about? Any kind of experience you've had with your atmosphere and how it interacts with other people's atmospheres? It's okay if you don't, but if something springs
I
to
have
mind,
one. I have
good.
one. Yeah. First, I want to say that was just incredibly well articulated. Um,
I have my moments.
you do. You're getting really good at that. So thank you for that, because that's crystal clear. Um, so this is an experience in hindsight. It was like, oh wow, okay. So, a year and a half ago, my second daughter asked if I would marry her and her then fiance, um, you know, um, officiate for their wedding.
Yeah.
And I said, of course, I'd be honored to. And so I did that, and they had a beautiful wedding. And my mother, who raised me, right, was walking into the the chapel we were in, and I was up on the front, and I was just in a tux and whatnot. Anyway, um, she walked towards me all the way down the aisle and could not see me. And I finally went up and I like came right directly, like moved really close into her space. And she was like, "Oh my God, I thought you were the preacher man."
Yeah.
She didn't see me at all.
Yeah. Isn't that
Yeah,
interesting? Yeah.
it is very interesting. Yeah.
Well, some people have the skill to disappear, and this is kind of like it gives you a little bit of an insight as to how they pull it off, right? Because you don't have to just vanish in order to disappear. You just have to be invisible to the person you want to be invisible to, right?
Mm.
I know a person who has no trouble walking into any place, whether it's a place you have to pay to get into or not. She can just walk right in and nobody ever says boo to her. So it's something in her atmosphere. It's something that it's how she uses the law of prayer to influence her atmosphere and the atmospheres of other people. So
Mm.
this can all be very fun, if you want to, experiment, just experiment and work with it. Like if you work with plants, if you have house plants, um, uh, feel the energy that's coming from the plant on your atmosphere, and also you can put energy into your atmosphere and then bring the plant into your atmosphere, and then you may find that you have what people call a green thumb. Or if you have to do mechanical things, you can do the same thing with inanimate objects. You sense that the thing you're working on has it's see, the atmosphere can exist in different domains. It's not just in the electromagnetic domain. It can exist in the idea domain, the mental domain. So a thing, say like a table. A table is a very definite shape and form and function, and all three of those things, the form and the function, the materials it's made out of, all of those things have a place in the mind of God as an idea. You see, that's where we say that a table has an archetypal form, which is not a table, but it's what people would call tableness. You have a table, and all tables partake of this archetypal mental thought form in the mind of God, which doesn't necessarily have a visual representation of itself. You see, it has a representational data set, you might call it. I mean, it's a little strange way to put it, but that's kind of more accurate. It exists as an information packet or configuration. So, and that would be how it exists on the mental plane. So if you have a sense of that, then you can identify that part of you, and that part of you that then shapes and informs your atmosphere. Then you interact with that part of the table with that part of you, and all kinds of interesting things can be revealed then to you. uh, things of its nature, things of, well, you just have to try it to see. But I think you kind of get a sense of that where, it's not only that it has a mental form to it, but it also has an astral or feeling data set, you might call it. It's like it has a table may have the memory of the feelings of everyone who's ever sat at that table, and all of the emotions that they had, all of the feelings they had. And it even would have a record of the feelings of the person who built the table. So, you've probably heard about this kind of thing in different, occult literature. But all of that's real. So, in using the law of mind, we don't have to make anything up. But if we just acknowledge that these things are real, then the imagination takes over and becomes not a manufacturer of images, but a receptor of images, a reader of images. And so if you use your imagination in this way, then you pay attention to what comes into your mind in image form or in feeling form or an idea form, and then pay attention to it, and it can actually give you real and possibly useful information. So all of this falls within the domain of prayer, because prayer is using the mind. We use the mind to know what we want, to image what we want, and to flesh it out with all the detail of the thing that we want. And then, of course, we also bring in feeling and color and sound and all of the other things. But that all hinges on the mind. Prayer is essentially a mental activity. So that's why I'm going into it tonight with talking about prayer and different ways to use it, because we want to get real clear that it's a very sophisticated subject, and it has lots of details and lots of categories and ways of using it and different applications, but it's all has to do with mind, and it all has to do with your conscious choice of thoughts and your conscious elimination of other thoughts, keeping other thoughts out, and which you can also do with your atmosphere, because just as a table has mental forms, the whole room has those mental and astral forms or feeling forms, and all of that's impinging on your atmosphere. So you can use your atmosphere to accept or deny those energies from coming in. And I would say that anytime you sit down in meditation, you want to do that first. You want to seal yourself off, in a sense, not let anything impinge on you from the outside, but so that then you create like a cocoon. Your atmosphere becomes a cocoon, and you then can be more attentive and receptive to what's coming from within, from the deepest recesses of yourself, your selfhood, your personhood, all the way, within that stream that you are. What is, we stream ourselves into the world. From where is the question? Where are you streaming from? Where do you come from? You see, so by using your atmosphere to seal everything external out, then you stand a much better chance of familiarizing yourself with that frequency, that vibration, that stream that's coming from deep within you, from behind the veil within you. You get a better chance to become familiar with it, and then you can distinguish what's coming from within you from what's impinging on you from the outer world. And that is really, really a good distinction to make. It's really the birthplace of wisdom, the birthplace of innovation. It's a birthplace of intelligence. All the good things that we want begin with a real solid domain. You see, we want to have our own kingdom, our own domain, wherein we are the ruler, and we establish our boundaries. This thing called the atmosphere. When we have really good boundaries, then life starts to make sense, and we feel like we have a greater sense of agency, and we're not being tossed around, like a small boat in a stormy ocean. So this is ultimately practical. This is probably the most practical knowledge you could ever have, but it doesn't just come to you. This kind of knowledge has to be learned. It's not natural. This is something because what we refer to as natural all has to do with our five senses. But our five senses are very limited because they're trained, even built to register the physical world. But just as we have the faculty of vision, and we know what part of the brain that faculty uses, we also know that with just a little bit of training, that our vision faculty can start to pick up higher rates of vibration and start to see these different domains, like the mental and the astral and even the spiritual. So it's not like we have extra senses. It's just that the senses that we have are just poorly developed. We haven't really exercised them in any other way except to register what's physical, the physical world. So, and all of this has to do with prayer, because it has to do with our intention. prayer has, you have to have intention. You have to know what you want and then want it, right? So not enough just to know what you want. You have to really engage yourself and insist upon it. See, it's not just wanting it. You have to insist that it manifest in your life. You have to want it, and you have to put yourself in a position where you're not willing to have it not manifest, right? You have to insist that it manifests. And then once you do that, then you can let go of it and let the forces that you put into motion play themselves out. You see, we don't will things into manifestation. There are ways to do that. That's like, you can read about that kind of thing, and there are lots of exercises and people who develop that to a high degree. But for most of us, we know what we want. We really get clear about it. We ask God for it, and then we let go of it. And when we let go of it, then the universe picks it up and starts to figure out how to bring it together into our experience. So that, in a nutshell, is prayer. So, which in it differs from meditation, so, very markedly. So, how has changing your mindset on something resulted in you seeing something new about that thing? Can you think of any time where that's happened?
Did you say about a bad thing?
No, about anything. You change your mindset about something, and then you then are able to, because of that different perspective, you were able to see something new about the thing.
I can say if I consciously make a choice to see the people I'm interacting with as having value and wisdom to offer, much more often than not, that's what I receive from them, no matter who it is.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Just considering that they may know something that you don't, and that information might be very useful to you.
Yeah.
And that's one level at which you can employ that. Another level is that you can see the other person as a possible outlet for the wisdom of God to come through.
Mm-hmm.
And you listen for that, right? So you're listening for the truth, not just for information.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that's very powerful.
Yeah.
I can kind of give an example. I've been in different organizations where I've been like the one in charge of the organization or the group, whatever. And so you get a whole bunch of different people coming into those groups. I'm thinking of one women's group that I was in charge of, and all kinds of personalities come in, and right away, when I first became involved with this, I had other people trying to tell me about, the different people. Oh, this person's like this, and don't do this and that, And so I had to really reel that in, because I had to see everyone just as they were and not be putting these judgments on them, so that for that exact purpose, so I could see what they had to offer. And yeah, it works. I mean, it's a whole mindset. So you're not judging, you're just open, so that you can see things objectively.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean,
Oh, totally. Because
yeah.
that happens so often. People want to predispose you to
Mhm.
their perspective or their opinion of the other person, and so that you'll be on their side, right?
But what was interesting is then, as time went on, um, I was appointing different people to do things. The skills, everybody's skill level became apparent of what they could do or what they were good at or what they really enjoyed or what made them happy to do. And the results of that, with everybody, kind of coming together and doing what they should be doing, um, yeah, what they should be doing. They were doing themselves, being themselves, and made for a much happier group as a whole. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
conflicts just kind of there, and there were things, and I was the one in charge, so they come to me, and I had to either, well, I had to downplay things, but I also had to be honest if there was stuff going on, where I had to address it with
right.
that
Yeah. Yeah. So what's happening in a case like that is you
I,
build
I
it. Oh,
go ahead.
I think you dropped out there for a second. Um, so when expectations are probably one of the most powerful forces that we exert on each other. When we have an expectation of someone, that's like a magnetized pattern in our atmosphere. And when our atmosphere then meets theirs, it just like a magnet will try to pull that out of the person. It'll try to make them behave in that way.
Mhm,
And anybody will resist that if it's not in accordance with what they actually are. So
mhm,
if what you're trying to do is really try to make them act in a way that they're not. So they're going to resist that, of course. So if you can eliminate the more you can eliminate expectations, then the more of an opening the person has to express into. Because
mhm,
really what you're doing is you're giving them permission. But but always be careful when you do that. It's a very powerful magnetizing force. So you want to be doubly careful to keep your boundary intact, so that whatever they're expressing is stopped at that point and doesn't impinge you directly.
right.
And not always, if you're in an intimate relationship with somebody, you don't want to do that, right? You want to do the opposite. You want to harmonize your atmospheres and allow the free flow of feeling between the two of you. But for everybody else, you always want to have those intact boundaries, and then control your expectations of the other person,
Mhm,
because and for your sake as well, because if they don't live up to your expectations, that's going to cause you stress.
mhm,
See, then you're gonna feel violated or disappointed. So that's very important, to remove expectations and just allow the person to be who they are.
mhm,
And I think this is very much what forgiveness means, because if you take the word give and think of it in terms of give way, you know, you step on a board and board gives way, and you drop to the ground. You want to give way to what the person is trying to express, and not try to superimpose an expectation on them, and that lets them be who they are. So that
right.
if a person cuts you off in traffic, for instance, what forgiveness then looks like is, well, that's just the way that person is. You see,
Mhm,
just the way they are. They're not doing it to you, and you don't, which relieves you then of the responsibility of having to declare what they did wrong. You see, what it then becomes more like a rainy day. You don't condemn the rain for raining. It's just something that happens.
right.
And this is a general approach. It's not true in every circumstance, because if somebody does something that crosses a line and something then needs to be said or responded to, then that's a different situation. I think you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So watch those expectations, and that's part of the reason why we say, or some people say namaste, which is the God in me salutes the God in you, because you're giving the widest possible expectation of the person for them to step into, which is the divinity within them. If you expect that God is in there, then that gives God the best chance of coming to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On the thing that Eli was talking about, his mom not being able to see him. Do, I had an experience with that with my daughter, but it was I wasn't able to see her. And I was thinking of that when you were telling me that, because or when you were talking, because I don't know, it's not something that she learned. It's just something that she's probably done for a long time. And that when I started thinking about it, I thought, wow, this is happening. But when she was here visiting a while back, uh, they were doing things, and her and my grandson, and they were doing things around the house and trying to help me and stuff. And I was looking for her in the house. And I walked by her in the kitchen about 3 times. She was sitting in the chair. I had to walk right by her. And I kept asking my grandson, where's your mom? Where is she? I'm not kidding. She was, I couldn't see her, And then
Yeah.
finally, the last time she raised her hand and kind of did that, and that, caught my attention. And I was just shocked that I had walked there so many times.
Oh yeah.
I think people, like you said, everyone has the ability to do these things. And I think there's a lot of people that do a lot of these things
Yeah.
without having learned it, but I don't know.
Yeah. I this is a theory, Renee.
Uh-huh.
Or is it a hypothesis? I always get confused on those. This could be a matter of polarity, because the atmosphere, being a field of energy, will have a polarity to it. It'll either be positive or negative, and it can be neutral.
Mm-hmm.
So if the person sitting there at the table, you not being able to see them, it might be because of some kind of a polarity mismatch. You see that, where if you're both this is why it's a theory. I haven't really thought this through, but in your describing that, it reminded me of if you want to hide something from me, put it in the refrigerator, because I can open the refrigerator looking for for say a container of leftover spaghetti, and it can be big in a bright red container right in the middle shelf, right in the front of the shelf, and I won't see it. I can count on it. And so I think that's the only thing it seems to me that it can be.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with the polarity. So like with a person, like the person you're talking about, was it
That's my daughter.
your daughter? Okay, so you care a lot about your daughter,
Mhm.
and you were looking for her, so that's
Mhm.
a particular polarity. You can kind of get a sense of it, whether it's positive or negative. We're not going to try to figure that out, but it's definitely a polarity at play there. So, and let's say that because you love her and you care about her, that polarity has a lot to do with caring and wanting, and a sense of urgency about it, because you're looking for her, right? And if you can't find her, the more you can't find her, the more urgent it becomes that you do find her, and that just increases whatever polarity is going on, just gets stronger and stronger, and the stronger it gets, the more invisible she gets.
Mhm.
So one way you could change that would be to just say to yourself, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care if she's here or not.
Yeah.
Right? I don't care. I just don't care. that would change the polarity. And
Mhm,
then she'd probably just stand out like, immediately.
mhm.
So you can see this is, you got to kind of approach this kind of stuff as a scientist would, and think about the energy, because
Mhm.
it always has to do with energy, and then think about the polarity of the energies, and then experiment with changing the polarity and see how that changes your perception.
Is that similar to when, like when we were doing that exercise with me and Alethea, when we were trying to visualize, one was thinking of something and the other one had to
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
visualize it? Is that
the
type of,
telepathy exercise. Yeah.
yeah.
So does that ring a bell then? How did that show up in that exercise? For those of you who don't know, you two, one of you would send an image and the other would receive it,
Mhm.
and then you'd switch roles, and it had to be a graphic of a very simple graphic, and I think you settled on
We did a
nature.
bunch, yeah.
Yeah. But and I had you guys keep notes and records of it, and you were hitting about 80% accuracy, if I remember.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, like we started out, we were, I told you, asked me what I was doing when I was doing it, and I said, well, I try to uh see right in front of me, and I don't know, but I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't seeing
yeah,
you know. And then you told me to quit, forget about time and space, that there is none.
yes,
And then when we do it, for me, when I did it then, that was when I had that one um visual of that eagle, that living color. I mean, it was just right there. And that's exactly what she was thinking about. It happened just like that. It was like
yeah,
you
yeah,
said that, and then it was like, okay. Yeah,
yeah.
very cool.
Isn't that great?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So it's all happening right here. It's not happening out there.
Right.
Exactly.
I knew
Yeah.
you'd recognize that, Eli.
Yeah.
What?
Eli was teaching me how to shoot a gun, and that's the big realization, is that it's all happening right here. It's not happening out there.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That makes,
Very, very interesting.
yeah. How'd you do?
How'd I do,
Amazing.
Eli?
He my muted. He did awesome. In in two less than 2 full days, he was doing things most people in the world can't do with a firearm. Just saying. He was hitting 100-yard target about this big with a 3-inch barrel handgun at 100
Well,
yards.
all right, Michael.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
How many people can do
So,
that?
yeah. Well, that was pretty amazing. Um, so yeah, you want to, so you experiment with that, because caring and wanting are like, they're very negative polarities, because you're trying to pull something out of the world and grab it, right?
Mhm.
So if you're not able to do something like that, then simply reverse that polarity, say, I don't care. I do not care. And see what that does. And then, of course, look for other polarities, polar opposites like that. And, those
Mhm.
are things you can contemplate and experiment with. But experiment, you see, experiment. That's the important thing. Always
Mhm.
approach your spiritual work with experimentation, with the willingness to try it, because this stuff is only as useful as you try it and work with it. And then when it starts becoming evident that you can get results, oh boy, then it's life gets really interesting, and it's a lot of fun.
I'd like to just add one thing here. I think is useful. whatever practice you're wanting to develop, right? You talked about how useful it is to understand what's coming from within us and what's coming from elsewhere. And that's incredibly, incredibly useful. I think it's helpful also to, if you have a disciplined practice, whatever it is, a daily practice, to try and do it at around the same time each day or evening to set that pattern. I think, right, that reinforces whatever you're working on, right?
Yeah,
It kind of builds
mhm,
momentum, right? Makes it more
right,
solid and more, it manifests it more effectively, so it becomes a tangible, workable part of your your atmosphere, right? And
right.
understanding.
You're employing forces of nature that are more subtle but very, very powerful. It's why when if you have a, a bunch of if an army marches across a bridge, they're told to break step. They don't go left, right. You know, they don't march in unison. They're told to just break their pattern and just everybody walk normally. Because if they walk across in cadence, it builds up harmonic resonance with the bridge, and the bridge will start swaying and can
Oh
even
wow.
sway to the point where it will fall. So
Wow.
it's so any kind of setting up a pattern like that, a temporal pattern, is very, very powerful. Plus, with a spiritual exercise, it's always great to have help from the other side. So whenever you engage in a spiritual path, then you catch the attention of those people whose job it is to help us in our spiritual endeavors. So if you set up a temporal pattern, which means doing it the same time every day, then that becomes quite loud in their domain. You see, it becomes very noticeable just simply because you're doing it according to a pattern. So if you want, if you have something that you're working on in particular and you want to advance as quickly as possible in it, do it every day at the same time or times to the second. You know, like if you're going to meditate at 6 a.m., say, be there at 6 a.m. on the dot, which means, on your phone, and then do it for a set period of time. And when the time is up, stop. And then the next period, do the same thing. And if you continue that way, it's going to create a hell of a buzz. And that will just, it's like, I hadn't thought of this before, but it's kind of like in that parable where the woman is knocking on her landlord's door in the middle of the night saying, "My children are hungry, I need bread." She's knocking. You know that part in the Bible? And she's knocking on the door and he says, "Go away." And she knocks some more and go away. And finally he gets up just to get rid of her, right? So she forces the issue. She makes him answer her prayer. And so knocking, is a temporal pattern. You see, knock and it shall open up to you. I mean, nobody knocks in random pattern, right? It's always a temporal pattern. It's knock, knock, knock. It's not knock, 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 unless that's a secret code,
Right.
secret knock. so you may think I'm reading that into it, but really, so
No.
many of these things are so natural. When you knock, almost everybody throughout history, everywhere in the world, if you knock on something, it's a temporal pattern. It's an even pattern. So by him saying, "Knock and it shall open unto you," there's a lot more to that than just banging on somebody's door or knocking on the door of heaven. See, the word knock has embedded within it, or hidden within it, hidden this other aspect. And that's what the word occult means. It means hidden knowledge. But in order to uncover, to unconceal these kinds of hidden knowledges, you have to You have to think about them, and you have to be somewhat of a parallel thinker, which means you can think along parallel tracks simultaneously and think symbolically, which is pretty much the same thing. If you can see how things symbolically represent each other, then you can really start to uncover this hidden knowledge which is all around us. And if you're going to work with prayer, then this is right up your alley, because when we pray, we are working with forces that are already in motion. See, that's the real important thing to know about prayer, that there's always a causal chain in action. Say you want a house and you have a really good idea of the kind of house you want. Well, houses are being bought and sold continuously all the time, everywhere in the world. So that's like a river of houseness, that's going through this domain we call real world. So prayer, then, what you're doing is you're tapping into that river of houseness, and you're putting a specific pattern onto that. And that way, then, the river, as it flows, will flow towards that pattern. You see, you're not manifesting a house out of nothing. You're taking an already existent flow of pattern, and you're just adding, you're tweaking it. That's really all prayer is you're tweaking this continual motion that's in the world, this movement of patterns. You're identifying a particular pattern, and then you're tweaking it so that it will slightly, ever so slightly, bend in your direction. You see? This is about as simple an explanation as you can get when it comes to how prayer works. Everything is always being fulfilled all the time. And so all you're doing is you're moving the target a little bit. Everything is flowing towards its own teleological destination, meaning its purposeful destination. It's destiny, you might say. So in order to get something, you just move that destiny. You move the destiny, and and you want to, of course, you want to move with that, and you want to position yourself so that you and the destiny are in the same place. So it's a science. You have to think about it scientifically and then work with it scientifically. So, did any of that make sense, what I just said for the past minute? Because that's I know it's a little abstract, but I think it's real enough that you can get it. It's how things work. It's how everything works. Everything is already here. And all we're doing is we're gently nudging it one direction or another. And if it's moving in a direction that you don't want it to go, or that, you can obviously see that a causal chain is moving in a very catastrophic direction, then you can either, shift it by degrees so it's not so catastrophic or goes into something altogether different, or you can just not be there when it happens, right? But if you attune your consciousness to this kind of cause and effect reality that we live in, that's always in action, then it really gives you a sense of where to be and where not to be.
It reminds me, the part you're talking about, the destiny moving, it brings back up how in the author legends, Merlin lived backwards.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he was always, he lived backwards. So where you perceive yourself wanting to be, you just feel, imagine, and immerse yourself as in that space, and it's like time moves backwards instead of moving like we think in linear forwards. Yeah.
I get that you can visualize that. I have a hard time getting it, but But I think if you develop that and flesh it out, it could really, maybe I can get it.
Well,
But I sense that it's real. As you say it, I can sense that you're seeing the reality of it, but I can't quite see
yeah.
it myself.
Well, I'll give you an example. Like, next class you have, okay? Right now, we'll just see the next class that Michael you hold at the end of it's going to be phenomenal. I, I'm already in that space.
Yeah,
It'll be
okay, okay.
a sense of wonder.
Yeah. Well, maybe, I don't know if in what your exposure in the forum was, but they talked about living from the future.
Yeah, yes, same thing.
Uh,
Same
yeah,
thing. It's that.
yeah,
And you know,
yeah.
even scientists like you know, quote uh quote what do you call it? People with street cred in the scientific modern world like Stephen Hawkins, you know, he talks about how theoretically it's right, it's no it or was it Einstein? That theoretically it should be no more difficult to remember the future than it is the past.
Yeah, yeah.
This is Einstein's actual theories. It's not like him just saying, "Oh, wouldn't that be cool?"
Right, right. Yeah, I think essentially that's how psychics work, isn't it?
Well,
They just you just remember the future because wherever all that causal chain is aimed at.
yeah, they're zoning in on the what the probability, right?
Yeah, the probabilities. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more unconscious a person is, then the less probabilistic it becomes, and it becomes what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, right,
The more, and
right.
conversely, the more conscious you are, then the more agency you have in changing the causal direction.
And it's not such a surprise,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's always nice to leave open that door window for surprise, right? Sense of wonder
oh yeah,
because it's cool.
yeah. As long as it's good.
Yeah,
All right, guys, this is fun, isn't it? This is a
yeah,
really
absolutely.
neat way to approach these teachings, and
It's going to
but
be a
just
fun week.
yeah, just remember, I mean, I think the main takeaway from this class is that we're not creating anything. We're using what's already in motion. If you get that, then boy, howdy, everything becomes a lot simpler.
Okay.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
as
Thank you,
always,
Michael.
it's always a pleasure. Renee, nice seeing you again.
It was nice seeing all you guys.
All
I
right.
see you too, Renee. I see you,
Oh,
Lida. Thank you.
let me tell you, if you haven't seen the holyorderofmans.com page, there's some changes on it, and you can now access quite a few classes. We've got one of the sections says YouTube on it, and you go click on it and you see all of us who are teaching. Eli, your videos are on it, mine are on it. Mark Ehrlich has his videos on it, and Margot has her videos. So we're building up a video library.
Hey,
So be sure to check that out.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you.
yeah. Very
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone.
All right. You and Greg have fun.
Have
Yeah,
a good week.
thanks.
Yeah. Bye bye.
We're gonna
Bye-bye.
go wrestle alligators.
Yeah.
All right. There you go.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.